The church doors creaked open with a sound that echoed like a distant thunderclap. Heads turned. Whispers rippled through the pews. My boots hit the polished wood floor, each step deliberate and measured. The uniform hugged my frame. Crisp green fabric with badges that gleamed under the stained glass light. Sergeant First Class Elena Vargas, back from the grave. My father's voice faltered mid-vow. He stood at the altar, tuxedo sharp, face draining of color. His new bride, a woman half his age with a veil like fresh snow, clutched her bouquet so tight her knuckles went white. She stared at me like I was a ghost risen from some forgotten battlefield. Maybe I was. The organ music stuttered to a halt. Guests shifted in their seats, silk dresses rustling, ties loosening in the sudden heat of confusion. I could smell the lilies from the arrangements, sweet and cloying, mixed with the faint polish of oak benches. My heart pounded, but my face stayed stone. Years in the army taught me that much. "Dad," I said, voice steady as a rifle sight. "Miss me?" He blinked, mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. The bride's eyes widened, her perfect makeup cracking at the edges. She whispered something I couldn't hear, but her lips formed the word, dead. The room held its breath. No one moved. It started 3 years ago, or maybe longer. Back when I was just a girl with dreams bigger than our small Texas town. Dad always said the military was no place for a woman. "Stick to teaching or nursing, Elena," he'd grumble over dinner, fork stabbing at his steak like it owed him money. "That's real work, not playing hero in some desert." I enlisted anyway, right after high school, with a backpack and a bus ticket to basic training. The recruiter promised adventure, purpose, a way out. Dad didn't come to see me off. Mom had passed years earlier from cancer, leaving just us two in that creaky house full of silence and resentment. He called me foolish, said I'd come crawling back, but I didn't. Basic broke me down and built me up stronger. I learned to march, shoot, survive. By my first deployment, I was Specialist Vargas, handling logistics in Afghanistan, keeping supplies moving through hostile territory. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept troops alive. Dad never asked about it. His letters, rare as they were, dripped with scorn. "Heard you're still out there wasting time," one read. "When are you getting a real job?" I pushed through, promoted to sergeant, then sergeant first class, led teams through sandstorms and ambushes, saved lives in ways he'd never understand. But the ridicule stuck like shrapnel. Every phone call home ended in arguments. "You're throwing your life away," he'd say. "For what? A paycheck and a pat on the back?" Then came the day everything shattered. My convoy rolled through a narrow valley near Kandahar. Intel said it was clear. It wasn't. RPGs lit up the sky. Dust choked the air. My Humvee flipped, world spinning in chaos. I remember the heat, the shouts, the pain in my leg. Then nothing. When I woke, it was in a makeshift cell. Taliban captors. Days blurred into nights. They questioned me, but I gave them nothing. Escaped during a raid by special forces 2 weeks later. Bruised, dehydrated, but alive. The army debriefed me, patched me up, sent me home on leave. Missing in action, they called it. MIA. Not dead. But Dad had other ideas. I walked down the aisle now, guests murmuring like wind through barbed wire. An old neighbor gasped. "Elena? But you're—" She trailed off. Dead. That's what they all thought. Thanks to him. The bride stepped back, veil trembling. Dad found his voice. "This isn't possible." His eyes darted, searching for an exit. But there was none. Not from this. I stopped at the front pew, close enough to see the sweat on his brow. "Surprise," I said softly. "I'm back." The priest cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should pause the ceremony." No one argued. That night, after breaking free from my captors, I stumbled through the rugged hills, until I hitched a ride with a passing coalition patrol back to the forward operating base. The medics there examined me thoroughly, wrapping my injuries with care. I had a couple of fractured ribs that made every breath sharp and painful, along with a badly sprained ankle that swelled like a balloon. But thankfully, nothing was permanent or life-threatening. As per standard Army protocol for missing in action cases, they notified next of kin right away, similar to how they handle confirmed deaths, but with hope still attached. A casualty assistance officer personally visited my dad's house, knocking on the door to deliver the news face to face. He explained clearly, I was listed as MIA, missing in action, but intensive search efforts were underway, and there was every reason to believe I could be found alive. But my father must have only heard, or chosen to hear, what suited him best. Perhaps he twisted the facts deliberately to serve his own purposes. By the time I fully recovered and returned stateside, the entire town had already mourned me as if I were gone forever, burying my memory in their collective grief. The truth dawned on me gradually, in unsettling pieces. It started with those strange, pitying glances from strangers at the airport as I limped through customs in my uniform. Then, my phone buzzed with a call from an old high school friend, her voice trembling with shock. Elena? Is that really you? Oh my God, we all thought you were gone for good. Your dad told everyone. Told everyone what? I pressed, my heart starting to race as a chill crept up my spine. That you were dead, she whispered, her words hitting like a punch. He even organized a hero's funeral service in your honor, with the whole town showing up to pay respects. My blood turned to ice in that moment, a wave of betrayal washing over me. It turned out Dad had transformed my disappearance into his personal stage for sympathy and gain. He organized parades in my memory, gave emotional speeches at community events, and collected donations for a supposed veterans' memorial fund. He played the role of the heartbroken father perfectly, soaking up the admiration and respect from neighbors who now saw him as a tragic figure. And that's how he met and courted his new bride, a younger woman drawn in by his poignant story of loss and resilience. All of this unfolded while I was out there, fighting tooth and nail to survive in enemy territory, clinging to life through sheer will. Now, standing in that church, I was shattering his carefully constructed perfect day. The bride's face grew even paler, her skin turning as white as soured milk under her veil. She must have known something was off, or at least suspected the cracks in his tale, because her eyes darted between us in growing horror. Explain this right now, I demanded, my voice low but steady, cutting through the tension like a knife, firm enough to command attention without shouting. He stammered, his composure crumbling as sweat beaded on his forehead. The telegram they sent, it said you were MIA, I interrupted sharply, holding his gaze. That stands for missing in action. Not killed, not dead, just missing, with teams still searching for me. The church filled with audible gasps from the guests, the sound rippling like a shockwave through the pews. Truth has a brutal way of detonating like that, exposing lies in an instant and leaving no room for denial. The hot Texas wind whipped through the open window of our battered old pickup truck as Dad gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. He was supposed to be driving me to the bus station for my departure to basic training, but instead, he veered right past it without slowing down. You're not going through with this, Elena, he growled, his voice rough like gravel under tires. This whole idea is pure madness. Turn around now before it's too late. I was just 18, as stubborn and unyielding as the dry dirt fields. We passed every day on our ranch. My heart pounded with a mix of excitement and defiance. I had already made my choice, and there was no backing out. It's already done, Dad, I replied firmly, trying to keep my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. I signed the enlistment papers last week at the recruiter's office. This is my future, and I'm not letting you stop me. He slammed on the brakes so hard that the truck skidded wildly to a halt on the loose gravel shoulder, kicking up a thick cloud of dust that swirled around us like an angry storm. coughing from the grit in the air. He turned to face me, his eyes blazing with frustration. The army? You? A young girl like you, joining the damn army? They'll chew you up and spit you out, Elena. It's no place for someone raised on a quiet farm like ours. What are you thinking? Like you haven't tried to chew me up already with all your doubts and criticisms? I shot back, my words sharper than I intended, fueled by years of built-up resentment. Ever since Mom died from that long battle with cancer 5 years ago, he'd become even more controlling, channeling his grief into rigid rules and expectations for my life. His face flushed a deep red, the veins in his neck standing out as he struggled to contain his anger. Mom's passing had changed him, hardened him into a man who saw the world in black and white, with no room for dreams that didn't fit his narrow view. She would have understood my choice. She always encouraged me to reach for something bigger, to chase adventures beyond our small town. But Dad? He viewed the military as a brutal, unforgiving man's world, filled with endless danger, dirt, and heartbreak. You'll regret this every single day, he warned, his tone dropping to a low, almost pleading rumble. You'll come crawling back home broken, Elena, if you even make it back at all. Is that what you want? To throw away everything for some foolish notion of glory? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I grabbed my duffel bag from the back seat, slung it over my shoulder, and stepped out into the scorching sun. The bus station loomed in the distance, its engine humming faintly like a promise of escape. Taking a deep breath to steady myself, I looked back at him one last time. I'm going to prove you wrong, Dad, I said, my voice stronger now, laced with determination. This isn't about glory. It's about finding my own strength, serving something greater than this town or your expectations. He didn't follow me. He just sat there in the truck, staring ahead, the engine idling as I walked away toward the bus that would carry me to a new life. Basic training slammed into me like a relentless sandstorm, fierce and unforgiving. I arrived at Fort Jackson in South Carolina, where the humid heat soaked right through our fatigues from day one. The drills never seemed to end, endless push-ups, obstacle courses, and marches that tested every muscle. Instructors barked orders like thunder, pushing us recruits to our absolute limits, breaking us down only to rebuild us tougher. I remember crawling under barbed wire in the mud, the sharp edges snagging at my uniform, firing M4 rifles at the range until my shoulders burned and my hands blistered, running for miles with heavy packs strapped to my back that felt heavier than I was. By that time, women had been fully integrated into combat roles for several years, since the policy change in 2016 opened up everything from rangers to infantry and even special operations. I watched my fellow sisters in arms excelling right alongside the men, shattering every stereotype with their grit and skill. It inspired me deeply, lighting a fire that helped me push through the exhaustion. Dad's harsh words still echoed in my mind during those grueling days. Waste of time, he'd called it, but I buried them deep under layers of sweat, discipline, and sheer determination. I sent my first letter home after surviving week 1. Made it through the initial grind, Dad. It's tougher than anything I faced, but I'm holding strong and learning fast. His reply came back quickly, scrawled in his familiar rough handwriting. This is all a complete waste of time, Elena. You're better than this. Get out while you still can before it destroys you. But I didn't quit. I couldn't. Not when I was finally proving to myself what I was capable of. Deployment hit faster than I expected. By 2020, I was shipped out to Afghanistan as a logistics specialist. My job involved coordinating convoys and managing supplies, making sure ammunition, food, and medical gear reached the front lines without fail. It wasn't the flashy frontline glory you see in movies, but it was absolutely vital. Without us, operations would grind to a halt. I saw my share of real action, too. Patrols through hostile areas where bullets whizzed past like angry hornets, and heartbreaking moments when we lost friends to hidden IEDs buried in the roads. One evening, I managed to call Dad from the base using a satellite phone, the connection crackling with static like distant gunfire. It's intense out here, Dad, I told him, my voice echoing slightly in the quiet tent. But what I'm doing is real. I'm helping save lives every day, keeping our team supplied and safe. He snorted dismissively, the sound cutting through the line like a knife. Playing soldier in the dirt. That's all it is. When are you going to wake up and come home? Get married? Start a family? Have kids? That's the proper path for a woman like you, not this nonsense. Anger boiled up inside me, hot and fierce, but I kept my cool. This is my path, Dad, I replied steadily. The one I've chosen, and I'm proud of it. One day, maybe you'll see that. We hung up abruptly, and after that, the silence between us stretched on for months, growing wider like a chasm I couldn't bridge. Still, promotions kept coming as I proved my worth. First to specialist, then up to sergeant. I ended up leading a team of 12 dedicated soldiers, planning intricate routes through enemy territory to avoid ambushes. During one high-stakes operation, we resupplied a remote forward base while under heavy fire. Bullets pinging off our vehicles, chaos all around. I took a minor graze to my arm from a stray round, blood soaking my sleeve, but I pushed through the pain and kept directing the team until the job was done. For that, they pinned a purple heart on my chest, a medal that symbolized not just bravery, but survival. I emailed Dad about it right away. Just got honored for bravery in the field, Dad. Saved the mission despite getting hit. Thought you'd want to know. His response was curt and cutting. That was just dumb luck, Elena. Don't get cocky out there. It'll get you killed. Instead of breaking me, his scorn only fueled me harder, turning doubt into drive as I geared up for whatever came next. Then came the ambush that changed everything. Our convoy was rolling out at dawn, the jagged mountains looming like silent guardians under a crisp, clear sky. Radio chatter was routine, everyone alert but calm. Suddenly an explosion rocked the lead vehicle, flames shooting up as debris flew everywhere. Gunfire erupted from the ridges above, pinning us down. I grabbed my rifle instinctively, returning fire through the dust and smoke while shouts and screams filled the air. Our Humvee took a direct hit next, flipping violently in a blur of metal and motion. The world spun into chaos, and then everything went dark. When I finally woke, rough hands were dragging me across rocky ground. My wrists were bound tightly behind my back, a blindfold blocking out the light. The truck they threw me into bumped harshly over uneven terrain, each jolt sending pain shooting through my body. I could hear my captors speaking in rapid Pashto, their tones harsh and demanding. Finally, they dumped me in a cramped dirt room, ripping off the hood to reveal a bearded man glaring down at me. "American woman soldier," he sneered, his eyes cold. "You will talk now. Tell us everything." I clamped my mouth shut, saying absolutely nothing, my mind racing with survival strategies I'd learned in training. The interrogations became a daily torment. Endless questions about base locations, troop movements, and supply routes. When I stayed silent, they'd slap me hard across the face, the sting lingering for hours. Water was doled out in scarce drips from a filthy bucket, and food was non-existent beyond moldy scraps of bread. My leg throbbed constantly from the crash, swollen and bruised, making every movement agony. In those long, cold nights, I huddled against the wall for any scrap of warmth, my thoughts drifting back to Dad and his endless mockery. "You'll break out there," he'd once said during one of our arguments. I'd proved him wrong so many times before, and I vowed to do it again, no matter what it took. I began planning my escape meticulously. The guards rotated every 4 hours, and one of them was lazy, often dozing off during his shift. When a fierce storm rolled in one night, thunder booming like artillery, it masked every sound perfectly. Using a jagged rock I'd pried from the floor, I slipped free from my bonds, my hands raw and bleeding. I crept out into the pouring rain, the downpour soaking me to the bone as I dashed into the darkness. The hills were slick and treacherous. I fell more than once, rolling down slopes and scraping my knees, but I kept pushing forward, adrenaline surging. As dawn broke, painting the sky in soft pinks, I stumbled upon a small hut. An elderly man opened the door, his face weathered and kind. I gestured desperately for help, and he nodded without a word, ushering me inside and hiding me in his barn. From there, he used a hidden radio to contact Allied forces. Soon, the roar of a helicopter filled the air, and a SEAL team swooped in for the extraction. "You're safe now, Sergeant," one of them said, helping me aboard with a reassuring grip. Back at the base, they medevaced me straight to a hospital in Germany for surgeries and recovery. The Army handled all the notifications efficiently. A casualty assistance officer visited Dad in person to explain, "Your daughter is MIA, missing in action, but we're conducting ongoing searches with every resource available." But as I later discovered, he twisted that message entirely to fit his own narrative. While recovering at the hospital, I scrolled through news apps on my tablet, my bandaged hands fumbling with the screen. That's when I saw the town articles popping up. Local hero Elena Vargas confirmed KIA in Afghanistan. There were photos of Dad in interviews, his eyes glistening with what looked like fake tears as he said, "She was my everything, died a hero serving her country." The community had rallied around him, fundraisers in my name, plaques dedicated at the local park. He even leveraged it to run for town council on a veteran support platform and won handily. That's where he met his new bride, at one of those memorial events, charming her with tales of his profound loss. Was it outright fraud? Not in a financial sense, at least not directly provable, but emotionally? Absolutely. He'd gained status, respect, and sympathy he never truly earned, all built on a lie about my death. Physically, I healed over time. The ribs mended, the ankle strengthened. But mentally, the scars ran deeper, nightmares of captivity haunting my sleep. In the end, I decided confrontation was the only way forward. And what better timing than his wedding day? I dressed in my full uniform, the fabric crisp and badges polished to a shine. Then I drove to the church, steeling myself for the moment. As I entered, the faces around me turned pale, a wave of shock rippling through the crowd. Back in our small Texas town, the news of my supposed death spread like wildfire through dry brush, igniting a wave of collective grief that enveloped everyone. Banners fluttered from lampposts and storefronts, boldly proclaiming, "In loving memory of Elena Vargas, a true American hero." The local church, with its white steeple piercing the blue sky, was packed to the rafters for the memorial service Dad organized just days after receiving the Army's notification. He stood tall at the wooden podium, his voice cracking with emotion as he addressed the somber crowd. Dressed in his best suit, a small American flag pinned to his lapel. "My dear friends and neighbors," he began, pausing dramatically as if choking back tears. "My girl, my only daughter Elena, gave her life out there in that harsh desert, fighting for the freedom we all hold so dear. She was brave, she was strong, and now she's gone, taken too soon in the line of duty. I'll never forget her sacrifice, and I hope none of you will either. Let's honor her memory by supporting our veterans and keeping her spirit alive in our hearts." But it was all built on lies, a carefully crafted deception that twisted the truth beyond recognition. The official telegram from the Army had clearly stated I was MIA, missing in action, with ongoing searches and no confirmation of death. Yet Dad chose to ignore that crucial word, missing, perhaps seeing an opportunity in the ambiguity. He went door to door telling neighbors and old family friends that I was dead, lost forever in some far-off battlefield. Word spread rapidly through gossip at the diner, whispers in the grocery store aisles, and posts on the town's Facebook group. Before long, the sympathy poured in like a flood. Cards, casseroles, and hugs from people who'd barely spoken to him before. Donations started trickling in, too, checks and cash handed over with solemn nods. "This is for the family, to help you through this tough time," folks would say, pressing envelopes into his hands. Did he pocket some of it for himself? It was unclear, and no one questioned him closely, but his social status skyrocketed overnight. Suddenly, he was invited to every community event, barbecues, town hall meetings, even holiday parades. He gave impassioned speeches at the local VFW hall, standing before rows of veterans in their faded caps. "As a Gold Star dad," he'd declare proudly, "I know the pain of losing a child to war. We must support our troops and never forget their sacrifices. Gold Star status is reserved for families who've lost loved ones in duty, entitling them to benefits like compensation, special burials, and community recognition." Dad didn't claim any official military benefits. He couldn't, since the Army knew I was alive and had updated him accordingly, but the town didn't know that. They treated him like a tragic hero, offering condolences and elevating him in ways he'd never experienced before. That's when the bride entered the picture. She was young, pretty, with long auburn hair and a warm smile that lit up rooms, a schoolteacher from the next county over. Drawn into his orbit at one of those emotional fundraisers held in my memory, they met over punch and finger sandwiches, where Dad shared his poignant tale of loss. "It still hurts every day," he'd confide to her softly, his eyes misting over. "Elena was my world, but now I have to find a way to move forward, for her sake." She fell for it hook, line, and sinker, seeing him as a resilient widower worthy of love and admiration. Their courtship was whirlwind fast, proposal coming just months later under a starry night sky at the town park, where a memorial bench now bore my name. The wedding was planned with all the trimmings, a grand affair at the same church where my funeral had been held, invitations sent out promising to honor Elena's memory during the ceremony. I learned about it all piecemeal through social media while still recovering overseas. Scrolling through my phone in the hospital bed, I'd see posts from old acquaintances, so happy for Mr. Vargas, finding love again after such tragedy. They'll honor Elena at the wedding with a special toast. Rage built inside me like a storm, hot and unrelenting. How dare he profit from my pain, turning my survival struggle into his personal gain. I flew home as soon as I was cleared, my mind set on confrontation. But I held back, biding my time for maximum impact, letting the lie fester until the perfect moment. The plane touched down smoothly on the runway at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, the engines whining down as we taxied to the gate. I stepped off into the bustling terminal, my legs still aching from the sprained ankle, causing me to limp slightly with each step. I was back in my uniform, the crisp green fabric a stark contrast to the casual travelers around me. As I made my way through the crowds, a few veterans and active duty personnel noticed the badges on my chest and offered respectful salutes. "Welcome back home, Sergeant," one older man in a ball cap said warmly, his eyes crinkling with genuine respect. "Thank you for your service. Glad to see you made it." I nodded gratefully, managing a small smile. But inside, a storm of emotions churned, relief at being on American soil mixed with dread about what awaited me in my hometown. I rented a compact car at the counter, the clerk's eyes widening briefly at my military ID before she handed over the keys with a polite, "Safe travels, ma'am." The drive south to our small Texas town took about 2 hours, the highway stretching out under a vast blue sky dotted with fluffy clouds. Familiar landmarks rolled by, billboards for local diners, fields of cotton waving in the breeze, and the occasional oil pump jack bobbing like a tired horse. My mind raced the whole way, replaying the hospital discoveries, those shocking news articles about my death, Dad's interviews where he painted himself as the grieving hero. How had he twisted everything so completely? I gripped the steering wheel tighter, knuckles white, determined to uncover the full truth. Pulling up to our old family house on the outskirts of town, I noticed Dad's truck was gone, the driveway empty except for fallen leaves from the big oak tree out front. The place looked the same, faded blue paint on the siding, porch swing creaking gently in the wind, but something felt off, like a shadow hung over it. I unlocked the door with my spare key, the familiar squeak echoing in the quiet hall. Inside, my breath caught. The living room had been transformed into a makeshift shrine to me. Framed photos of me in uniform lined the mantel, surrounded by flickering battery-operated candles, folded American flags, and stacks of sympathy cards. A newspaper clipping pinned to the wall screamed the headline, "Local Soldier Elena Vargas, Killed in Action. Community Mourns." My stomach twisted as I picked up a card, reading the scrawled message, "So sorry for your loss, Mr. Vargas. Elena was a true patriot." Needing answers, I pulled out my phone and dialed an old high school friend, Maria, whose number I still had saved. She answered on the second ring, her voice bursting with disbelief. "Elena? Oh my God, is it really you? We thought you were dead." The whole town grieved. There was a huge memorial at the church, flags at half-mast, everything. My heart sank further. "Maria, slow down. What exactly happened? The army said I was MIA, not dead. Dad knew that. They sent an officer to tell him." She hesitated, then spilled it all in a rush. "Your dad came around right after the notification, tears in his eyes, telling everyone you'd been killed in an ambush. He organized parades, gave speeches about your sacrifice, and even set up a donation fund for veterans in your name. People donated tons, money, food baskets. It boosted him big time. He ran for town council on this proud father of a fallen hero platform and won by a landslide. That's how he met his fiancée, too, at one of those fundraiser events. She's this sweet teacher from the next town over. Totally bought into his story of heartbreak and strength." I leaned against the wall, processing the betrayal. He profited from this? Turned my life into his gain while I was out there fighting to survive? "Yeah," Maria said softly, her tone laced with sympathy. "It changed him, made him a local celebrity. But Elena, are you okay? What really happened to you?" "I'll explain later," I replied, my voice steady despite the rage building. "Right now, I need to think." Hanging up, I paced the room, piecing it together. Dad's rise to council seat, the new bride, all built on lies. The wedding invite had arrived during my recovery. I'd ignored it at first, but now it felt like fate. This was my chance to expose everything. I spent the next few days laying low, gathering strength and planning the reveal. No direct confrontation yet. I wanted the impact to be public, undeniable. Wedding day dawned clear and sunny. I dressed carefully in my full uniform, polishing every badge until it gleamed, a symbol of the truth he'd buried. The church parking lot was packed with cars, guests in their finest streaming inside. I waited until the ceremony started, then pushed open the heavy doors. As I walked down the aisle, faces turned, paling in shock, whispers erupting like gunfire. The altar loomed on the front of the church like a stage set for a drama no one expected. Adorned with cascading white roses and flickering candles that cast soft, wavering shadows on the polished wood. Dad stood there in his tailored tuxedo, his face glistening with sweat under the warm glow of the chandeliers, his once confident posture now rigid with shock. His new bride clung to his arm, her elegant lace gown trembling slightly, the veil framing a face that had drained of all color. Her wide eyes locked on me as if I were an apparition from a nightmare. The priest hovered uncertainly behind them, Bible in hand, his mouth agape mid-sentence. The organ's last notes hung in the air, replaced by a heavy silence broken only by the rustle of programs and muffled gasps from the pews. You can't be here," Dad stammered, his voice cracking like thin ice underfoot, his hands clenching into fists at his sides as he took a shaky step forward. Beads of perspiration trickled down his temple, soaking into his starched collar. "This has to be some kind of mistake. You're supposed to be gone." I stood firm at the end of the aisle, my boots planted solidly on the red carpet runner, the weight of my uniform grounding me amid the chaos. The badges on my chest caught the light, a quiet reminder of the battles I'd fought, both overseas and now here. I'm right here, Dad, I replied evenly, my voice carrying through the hushed room, steady from years of commanding under fire. Alive and well. No thanks to the story you spun. You told everyone I was dead, but that was never the truth. The bride's grip tightened on his sleeve, her bouquet of lilies wilting slightly in her grasp as she turned to him, her voice a whisper laced with betrayal. What is she talking about? You said your daughter died overseas, a hero's death. You showed me the articles, the memorial photos. Was that all a lie? Guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, silk dresses whispering against wooden benches, murmurs rippling like waves. Is that really Elena? But the funeral. What's going on? An elderly aunt in the front row clutched her pearls, her eyes darting between us in confusion. I took a deep breath, addressing not just Dad, but the entire room, my words clear and measured to cut through the growing tension. The Army notified him I was MIA, missing in action, after my convoy was ambushed. They sent an officer to his door, explained searches were ongoing, that there was hope. But he ignored that part, twisted it into killed in action for sympathy, for parades, for donations to that so-called Veterans Fund. While I was captured, escaping through storms and hills, fighting to survive, he was here building a new life on my grave. He even met you, I nodded toward the bride, at one of those memorial events, didn't he? Courted you with tales of his tragic loss. Dad's face flushed crimson, his jaw working as he struggled for words, glancing desperately at the crowd for support that wasn't coming. I misunderstood the telegram, he finally blurted, his tone defensive and wavering. It said you were gone, lost in action. What was I supposed to think? The officer was vague, and with no updates, I thought the worst. It wasn't a lie. It was grief. Real grief. No, Dad, I countered firmly, stepping closer, my limp from the old injury barely noticeable now. You chose to bury me because it suited you. Gained a council seat, respect, a new start, all on a foundation of deceit. That's not misunderstanding. That's emotional fraud. You ridiculed my career when I was alive, called it a waste. Now you profit from my death? The bride pulled away from him slowly, her eyes filling with tears as realization dawned. She shook her head, veil slipping slightly. If this is true, I can't do this. The wedding's off. Her voice broke on the last word, and she turned, hurrying down the side aisle with a bridesmaid rushing after her, the train of her dress trailing like a defeated flag. Dad stood alone now, the altar feeling vast and empty around him, his shoulders slumping as the murmurs grew louder. The priest cleared his throat awkwardly. Perhaps we should adjourn. But no one moved, all eyes on the man who'd built his world on sand, now watching it crumble. I didn't feel triumph, just a hollow release, like exhaling after holding my breath too long. The confrontation wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my truth in front of everyone he'd deceived. The days following the wedding confrontation unfolded like a slow-moving storm clearing the sky, revealing truths that had been hidden for far too long. Word spread through our small Texas town faster than a prairie fire, carried on whispers in the coffee shop, heated discussions at the barber shop, and urgent posts on the local Facebook group. By evening, everyone knew Elena Vargas wasn't dead. She'd walked into her father's wedding alive and in uniform, exposing his web of lies. Neighbors who'd once clapped him on the back with sympathy now avoided his gaze, their faces etched with disappointment and betrayal. How could he do that to his own daughter? I overheard one woman murmur at the grocery store, her cart loaded with canned goods, as she shook her head in disbelief. Dad's fall from grace was swift and unforgiving. The town council, where he'd won his seat riding the wave of false heroism, called an emergency meeting just 2 days later. Colleagues who'd praised his strength now demanded his resignation, citing the deception as a breach of public trust. "You misled us all, Mr. Vargas," the chairman said sternly during the public session, his gavel tapping the table like a judge's final word. We can't have a leader who builds his platform on falsehoods. Dad tried to defend himself, stammering through a prepared statement. It was a misunderstanding, folks. The Army's message was unclear, and in my grief, I assumed the worst. I never meant to hurt anyone, least of all my daughter. But the room erupted in murmurs of doubt, and by the end of the week, he'd lost his position, his name stripped from the council roster. The donations he'd collected for the Veterans Fund were audited, revealing sloppy accounting that bordered on misuse, though no charges were filed. He became a pariah, his truck parked alone in the driveway, the once bustling house now silent. I chose to stay in town, not out of obligation, but to reclaim the life he'd tried to erase. Renting a small apartment near the old family home, I focused on rebuilding, physically therapy for my lingering injuries, counseling sessions to unpack the trauma of captivity and betrayal. The Army granted me extended leave, and I used it to volunteer at the local VFW hall, sharing my real story with veterans who nodded knowingly, their own scars mirroring mine. Schools invited me to speak during career days and Veterans Week assemblies. Standing before wide-eyed students in the high school gym, I'd say, service isn't about glory or medals, it's about resilience, even when those closest to you doubt you. One kid asked, "What was the hardest part, Sergeant Vargas?" I paused, then replied honestly, "Coming home to find my own father had buried me. But remember, truth always rises, no matter how deep the lie." Years slipped by like pages in a well-worn book, each one turning with a quiet resolve that slowly mended the fractures in my life. The crisp Virginia air, sticking to Texas. As per the story's setting, the dry Texas winds carried a sense of renewal as seasons changed, the scorching summers giving way to milder falls where leaves crunched underfoot like whispered apologies. I had settled into a routine that felt earned, not imposed. Mornings jogging along the dusty trails near my apartment to keep my body strong and my mind clear. Afternoons volunteering at the community center where I'd teach self-defense classes to young women, sharing stories of resilience without dwelling on the pain. The limp from my ankle had faded to a mere memory, a subtle reminder during rainstorms. But the deeper wounds, the betrayal, the isolation, those took longer to scar over. Peace didn't come in a rush. It built gradually, like rebuilding a fence post by post. I started small, accepting invitations to town events where folks now greeted me with genuine respect, not pity. "Sergeant Vargas, it's an honor," an old shopkeeper would say, tipping his hat as I bought groceries. I'd smile and nod, feeling the weight of my uniform in spirit, even when I wore civilian clothes. The Army had transitioned me to reserve status, allowing time for reflection, and I used it to pursue a degree in counseling, turning my experiences into tools to help other veterans navigate their own battles back home. Family mending was the hardest part, a delicate dance of tentative steps and guarded words. Dad and I didn't leap into hugs or tearful reunions. Instead, we met halfway, starting with neutral ground like the local diner over black coffee and pecan pie. Our first real conversation happened about a year after the wedding fiasco, under the fluorescent lights of that greasy spoon, the smell of frying bacon thick in the air. He slid into the booth across from me, looking older, his hair grayer, lines etched deeper around his eyes from the town's cold shoulder. "Elena," he began hesitantly, stirring his coffee endlessly with a spoon that clinked against the mug. "I know I don't deserve this sit-down, but I've been thinking a lot. About everything. The telegram, the lies. It wasn't just a mistake. I was scared, angry, lost without your mom. And when you enlisted, it felt like you were leaving me behind too. I twisted the news because the attention made me feel important again, like I mattered. But it cost me you. And that's the biggest regret of my life. Can you ever forgive an old fool like me?" I set down my fork, the pie suddenly tasting like ash, and met his gaze steadily. "Forgiveness isn't easy, Dad," I replied. my voice soft but firm, echoing the command presence I'd honed overseas. You ridiculed my dreams, called my service a waste, then built a throne on my supposed grave. It hurt more than any ambush ever could. But I've seen enough war to know holding on to anger destroys you from the inside. So yes, I can try. If you meet me halfway. No more excuses. Ask about my life. Really listen. Show up. Not just in words. He nodded, swallowing hard, his eyes glistening. I will, Elena. Tell me about Afghanistan. Not the bad parts, unless you want to. What made you keep going out there? We talked for hours that day, me recounting the camaraderie of my team, the small victories like resupplying a village or the rush of an extraction under fire. He listened, really listened, asking questions like, what was the food like? Or, did you make friends who stuck? It was awkward at first, silences stretching like taffy, but it opened a door. Over time, those meetings grew into family dinners at his house, where we'd grill steaks on the back porch, the sizzle mingling with tentative laughter. His new life, without the bride, who'd left town quietly, became simpler, focused on volunteer work at the VW, ironically supporting real veterans. I'm making amends, he'd say one evening as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in oranges and pinks. Helping folks like you taught me what honor really means. I leaned back in the lawn chair. Knox, my adopted dog from the shelter, a loyal mutt with a matching limp, resting his head on my knee. It's a start, Dad, and for what it's worth, I'm proud of that. The real healing came in quiet moments, driving past the old farmhouse, inspired by sample, but adapting. Or rather, our family ranch, now a place of peace where I'd plant flowers in Mom's old garden, feeling her spirit in the soil. Or speaking at schools, inspiring kids with, strength isn't about never falling, it's about rising every time. The lesson endured. Truth, once unearthed, has a way of rooting deep, fostering growth where only scars once were. In the end, our bond wasn't perfect, but it was real, forged in fire, tempered by time. And as I looked to the horizon, stars twinkling like distant metals, I knew I'd found home not in a place, but in the peace of being seen, finally, for who I truly was.